What's up, guys? This is TheKephas. In this video, I am going to showcase some new macros that I have created for World of Warcraft using a mod called Gnome Sequencer Enhanced. This mod allows you to create extremely powerful macros that can perform most, if not all, of your rotation with a single button. This can be extremely useful for individuals like myself who has a disability, or for people who just want to be lazy. So keep in mind that these macros are created primarily for those who are playing the game at a more casual level, but feel free to use them and alter them as you see fit. If you have further questions about the mod or my macros, I recommend checking out my FAQ video, and if you'd like to learn more about how to play the class in question, you might want to check out my crash course. It can help get you started, and I will provide links to all of these things in the description below. Today we're going to check out the macros that I've created for balanced druids. So we're going to type /GS to open up Gnome Sequencer, and we're going to get right into this. I was pretty happy with balanced druids. They're actually one of my favorite classes to play. I think the rotation is a lot of fun, and there are a lot of options that you can use with macros. You can't really do a one button macro, like do everything with one button. Really, you're gonna have to compromise somewhere, but you can still do a lot and do what works best for you. I chose what I thought worked best for me and what I thought was the easiest, so let's go ahead and get into it. Okay, so there's Kef Balance L and then Kef Balance S. Obviously, one is for lunar eclipse and one is for solar eclipse, and both of them will work for single target and AoE. So we're going to look at L, the lunar eclipse one, first here, and we'll go into it. So if you are not in Moonkin form, the macro will put you in Moonkin form. That's what I'm currently in now. If you're wondering, this is something that you can achieve with a glyph, and it'll put you in like a cool celestial form, but it is Moonkin form. Okay, so there is that. So if you're not in Moonkin form, the macro will put you there. If you hold down Control, the macro will use Moonfire. If you don't hold down Alt, the macro will use Sunfire. That's how I manage my dots, or that's how you can through this macro. I thought that was easiest. Obviously, you could also just put those abilities on separate buttons if you want to, but that's another way, and this is what I thought would work the best. And this is going to be in both macros. Of course, we'll go over that soon. In the main area, you've got, if you choose Fury of Elune as a talent, the macro will obviously use that on cooldown. And then we'll skip down to the next bit. If you choose New Moon, the macro will use that on cooldown. We'll get more of that ability when we get into the the talent portion. And then lastly, because this is Lunar Eclipse, the macro will use Starfire. That'll be your filler. That's what the macro is mostly going to be using. But let's take a look at this this line here. If you hold down Shift, the macro will use Starfall. Otherwise, if you're not holding down anything, the macro will use Star Surge. This is to spend your astral power. Now, I thought about this for a while, and I thought about what would work, what was easiest. I liked including it in the macro for simplicity. However, the thing to remember is that Starfall uses more astral power than Star Surge. So if you're wanting to use Starfall, even if you don't have enough astral power, you're going to want to hold down Shift until Starfall is used. So that way you're not accidentally using any astral power on Star Surge. That's just kind of how it works. It's a little weird, a little clunky at first, but you kind of get used to it. You only want to use Starfall just enough to keep up the the damage effect or whatever, the damage area. You want to use Starfall just to keep the Starfall going, and then you'll use Star Surge. Otherwise, of course, this is going to use Star Surge. It's going to use it as soon as you have enough astral power, which to me works pretty well in single target, unless you're trying to like pull it up to do a bunch at once or something like that. I just like to use it when it's there for simplicity's sake. But I mean, you could remove these abilities from the macro entirely and then not have to worry about it. That's an option as well. You could also like use Shift for Wrath in this macro and then just use your astral power abilities on separate buttons. It's entirely up to you what you think works the best for you. Like I said, there's a lot of options here, what you can do with modifiers and what you can manage separately. You're going to have to manage something separately, whether it's your dots, having two macros for Lunar Eclipse and Solar Eclipse, or using your astral power abilities on separate buttons. It's up to you what you want to do, but I chose to do it this way. So just keep all of that in mind with how this class works. It's pretty easy to macro, but it's also kind of like it's never going to be perfect because it is a macro. So just stuff to think about. So let's get into this bottom line. It's going to use Celestial Alignment on cooldown, and then of course Warrior of Elune is also included in the Lunar macro, so that way whenever you enter Lunar Eclipse, you can use Warrior of Elune whenever it's available, so that way you'll get those free Starfires. So that's also nice as well. It's going to use that on cooldown. So let's go ahead and take a look at the S macro for Solar Eclipse, and obviously this is going to do the exact same thing as the other one, except it's going to use Wrath instead of Starfire. Okay, so what you'll do is when you begin a fight, you'll pick one of the two macros, whichever eclipse you want to enter, you'll use the other macro. So you use like this one, hit it twice to do, or hit it enough to do Wrath, you'll see the eclipse happen, and then you'll switch over to the other macro, of course, using your modifiers accordingly to put up the Moonfire, Sunfire, and then of course, holding down Shift whenever you want to use Starfall, and then letting go of that to spend your astral power on Star Surge. That's how the macros are designed to work. Otherwise, they're pretty much the exact same except for the main abilities, of course, and the other one having Wrath of Elune, so keep that in mind. Now, let's go ahead and look at those talents real quick, and then that'll be pretty much it. Now there are a couple of talents that we do need to go over here. The main, of course, the Warrior of Elune is included. Force of Nature, unfortunately, is not included, and that's because it's a targeted area ability, which is one of the green reticles on the ground. Macros can't really handle those types of abilities without doing like an at player or at mouse over. And in this case, you want to have it near your enemies, so you wouldn't want to put it at player. And I don't like using at mouse over or at cursor macros in my spammy macros. That just doesn't work very well in my opinion. So I don't do that, but you could if you wanted to, but I just don't recommend it. I just recommend using Force of Nature on a separate button entirely. Now, a lot of these are just kind of, CC utility things, nothing to worry about until we get down to here. Okay, so Incarnation, this ability just replaces Celestial Alignment. The macro will use this ability as it would a Celestial Alignment, so that's something that works out nicely. And then the other one is Stellar Flare. Now, originally I was going to put this in with the modifier, but then I decided to use Shift for the Astral Power ability. So if you do go with Stellar Flare, unfortunately you are going to have to manage that ability on a separate button. There's really no way that I can include it in the macro. It's a dot, and it doesn't have a cooldown, so obviously it would not work in the macro. Okay, so just keep that in mind. And then of course, if we move down, Fury of Elune, as you saw, is included in the macro. And then New Moon is also included. Now, New Moon's an interesting ability. It has 3 charges and it generates astral power. It also has a cooldown, so that's how it works. So when it uses New Moon, it'll switch to Half Moon, and it'll keep going with that, cycling through those abilities, and it will use the corresponding abilities that it switches to, just as it would New Moon, just like it would do with Incarnation. So it's going to do the same thing. It's going to use the ability, and it's going to cycle through the next ability. So as the ability switches, as the spell switches, the macro will also recognize that switch as well. So it's just simply going to use those abilities on cooldown, use up the charges. It may not always be the most efficient way to use these abilities, but it is going to use them for you. So if you want to manage the New Moon cycle ability, it's a really cool ability how it switches through and does different things like that. It's really neat. If you want to manage that on a separate button, you can, but it is included in the macro for simplicity. So of course, it's entirely up to you what you decide to do. I always go for simplicity to make the game as easy as possible for people. But there you have it, you guys. Let me know what you think about these macros in the comments below, and otherwise I will see you guys on the next one. And that's basically everything you need to know about these macros and how they work. Remember, these macros work best when they are spammed, so either press the button as fast as you can or use a rapid fire button, which is fair game as long as you're the one pressing the button. As powerful as these macros are, they are far from perfect. So if you want to play the game at a high level and get the most out of your class, I highly recommend that you play the game without these macros. But if you'd like to get started with Gnome Sequencer Enhanced, you can do so by downloading and installing the mod. A link can be found in the description below. Along with it, you will find pay-spin links for any macros featured in this video. If you'd like to use them, simply click the link and you'll be taken to a raw paste-spin of the macro. Select the entire macro, copy, log into the appropriate class, type /GS to open the Gnome Sequencer screen, click on Import, paste the macro into the available space, make sure that Automatically Create Macro Icon is checked, and click Import. You can now drag the icon to your action bar and the macro is ready to be used. If you followed all the steps correctly, the macro should be working fine. If something isn't working, Start over and make sure that you follow all the steps correctly. If you are having further issues, I recommend that you check out the mod page or contact the mod's author for more information. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, let me know by clicking that like button. And feel free to share it with your friends so they can enjoy it as well. And if you'd like to see more videos, you can subscribe to the channel and click on the bell icon to be notified as soon as new videos are posted. You can also follow me on Facebook, and if you'd like, you can support my work on Patreon. Links to all that stuff can be found in the description below. This is TheKephas. Until next time.